Lloyd Burrell, thanks for being here on the Immune Resiliency Summit. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, Jason. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really wanted to bring you on because um, as the world has increased in its electromagnetic radiation, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell signals, etc., this has been a multi-year process. And as I've dug into this research, you were one of the early people talking about this from not from a place of necessarily expertise, but of more of citizen investigative journalist type of research, just asking good questions. And I just came across a lot of work that you've done, and you covered the gamut, and it's very interesting when I find people like that, because it comes from a place of genuine curiosity. So again, you've been that for me over the years, and I've followed your work since then. And so I thought, who better to bring on to this summit to talk about how this radiation has been affecting the planet, affecting life, how it's increased. And as we've gone through this crazy time of coronavirus and this increased awareness around our immune health, how something like radiation may play a role in how our body functions with respect to other organisms and that kind of thing. So I'm excited to see what you have for us today. And please jump into your presentation whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to be sharing this information with you, which is some of it's information I've not actually shared before. So I'll just jump straight into it if that's okay. So what I'd like to talk about today, Jason, is how EMFs impact your brain, gut, mitochondria, and immune system, and also what you can do about it. Most importantly, what you can do about it, because that's what I've been doing really since I've been talking online, is sharing solutions. So it's really important that people understand that there are solutions. So why am I talking about this? In my case, things are a little different because I am actually what's known as electrically hypersensitive, and this just happened one day out of the blue. In 2002, I developed debilitating symptoms overnight. I answered my cell phone and I started reacting just like that, boom, with no apparent explanation. And this is what started me on this EMF electromagnetic field journey. It's what started me, well, firstly, just exploring, for me, just trying to understand what the heck was going on, because I was literally overnight suffering some pretty major symptoms, some immediate symptoms, short-term symptoms like hot head when I put the cell phone next to my head, then like just intense pain within a very short period of time. This all in 2002. It just over a few telephone conversations, it all just came out of nowhere. Hot head, prickly skin, and a disorienting kind of sensation, a bit like a hangover kind of thing. And then there were these other symptoms which came on medium to long term, which was massive fatigue, which was weight loss, weight gain, very bad headaches, like migraine kind of headache, day-long headaches, aches and pains all over my body, gut issues. I was in a mess, to be honest. And this lasted for the best part of 10 years. It took me 10 years to figure this out. And the good news is today, I still sense EMFs, but I don't get the debilitating symptoms. So that's the really good news I want to start by sharing with everybody. So what people need to understand is that there's about 5% of the population which has symptoms like me, and that they associate with EMFs. Okay. So what I mean by that is, and this is an approximation, we don't exactly know, but this is according to Professor Magda Havas, who's been studying this for decades. That's to say there is this clear association, because I was actually quite fortunate. There was a clear association between holding the cell phone and what I was experiencing. Whereas with some people, there's not. With about 35% of people, they have symptoms, but they've no idea that it's their cell phone or other EMF device, EMFs, that are causing this. So that's a really important point. But the even more important point, a more fundamental thing, probably the most fundamental thing to understand from this whole presentation is that EMFs impact everybody. Okay, absolutely everybody, even though you can't feel it. This is what the science is telling us. And also the second really important thing to understand is that EMFs are cumulative. This is why, one of the reasons I keep talking about it is because the effects are cumulative. They build over time. So even though you can't feel it, and it's building over time. And the research links these exposures to a long list of serious diseases like cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases, multiple sclerosis. Honestly, there is so much research to so many different diseases. It is really quite amazing. And then there's this controversy with this whole subject, because we have what governments, what industry, cell phone industry, utility industry even, is saying is that somehow there is this category of EMFs called ionizing radiation, which is really dangerous, which is things like medical x-rays or radioactive sources. And then we've got this other category, which is non-ionizing, which is like this. So it's like this imaginary line where all of a sudden it's, safe, not safe. Okay. And these non-ionizing electromagnetic fields are, what's known as radio frequencies, microwaves, electric fields, magnetic fields. And this is what we're talking about today, this non-ionizing radiation, this non-ionizing electromagnetic fields, which is lower energy. And there's a lot of controversy behind this, which I don't particularly want to go into today, but that's what you need to understand. And so here's the thing, is that your cells are in distress, even if you feel fine. So you're fine, you're using a cell phone, you're surrounded by EMFs, you can't feel a thing, and yet it is literally a silent killer. So today's focus is I'm going to be looking and talking about how EMFs impact the brain, the gut, the mitochondria, and the immune system. Okay, there's EMFs impact every aspect of our health, but I'm going to focus on these 4 aspects.
Now, Lloyd, before you move on, and maybe you'll get to this, but there's this idea that they don't impact our health, right? And so what I know that you're going to present us with some great information. I'm curious, is this backed in research, or is this just theory still at this point?
No, it's completely backed in research. There's thousands of independent studies which you've probably never heard of. Most people are not interested in studies, let's face it. I wasn't interested in studies. Why did I start doing this research? Because I was sick. And this was 2002 when it all started happening to me. Nobody was really talking about this online. The internet wasn't the place it is now, where there are websites which are clearly authority websites with reliable information and so on. Whereas back then it was a bit the Wild West kind of thing. And there was really no information on EMFs and health, and certainly no solutions. So there are thousands of research studies on this, which I'm going to talk about a little bit during our presentation.
Beautiful, thanks.
So what are EMFs? So when I say EMFs, what I actually mean is electromagnetic fields. Some people say EMF, they mean like electromagnetic frequencies. Some people don't even say EMF. When I say people, I mean experts. They say electromagnetic radiation. So there's all these different acronyms. So when I say EMFs, I'm talking about electromagnetic fields. And again, I'm talking about man-made electromagnetic fields, because there are natural electromagnetic fields as well. The Earth is, we are surrounded by electromagnetic fields. In fact, we all have our own electromagnetic field. And this is another reason why this is so fundamental to health, is because this is how our bodies actually work with electromagnetic fields and with biophotons. We're getting this communication, which is just non-stopped with the universe, with the quantum field, and with all the cells in our body. We are electromagnetic beings, subtle energy beings.
Well, and the most fundamental electromagnetic field that I think we can all relate to comes from the sun, right? Like if we stay out in the sun too long, this electromagnetic radiation or electromagnetic field coming from the sun that we can really feel, which is the UVA and UVB radiation, it's directly impacting us. And we know that, especially those of us with really light skin, right? We can't stay out in there too long or we get burned. So that's just kind of a fundamental one, isn't it? That we're all familiar
It
with.
is perhaps the most fundamental one, and all life on Earth is dependent on that. We
Right.
get our energy from that. And we're converting that because light is on the electromagnetic spectrum, and we're able to get energy from many sources, from food sources, plants and animals, and plants are using photosynthesis, but we're actually using a form of photosynthesis too. So yeah, this is the fundamental energy source on the planet. Yeah, absolutely. So it's fundamental to life, electromagnetic fields, and yet most people really don't know anything about it and are not particularly interested in knowing more about it because they can't see the point. So, I'm going to hopefully explain to you the point of all of this. And so one of the pioneers in this, somebody I respect very greatly, he's passed away a few years ago now, is Martin Blank, PhD. I interviewed him on my podcast. There's many definitions, and one definition which he gave was that electromagnetic fields are invisible forces that surround us. So that's a really easy understanding. Pretty much anybody can get the message on that. And then we have, in terms of these, again, man-made exposures, there's two kinds of man-made exposures. There's a wired and the wireless. And I always like to talk about this right at the beginning because there is this almost obsession now with wireless because we're moving into this 5G world, and people, if they are a little bit aware of it, of this EMF problem, then it's all this talk about 5G, which personally is, I find, great in the sense that at least we are talking about it. But for me, there's too much onus, too much obsession about wireless. We need to recenter and understand that wired exposures are a problem too, which I'm going to explain more fully. So this, again, back to sort of kind of basics, and I don't want to get too technical, but whenever we're talking about electromagnetic fields, we're always talking about frequency and wavelength, and they've got this inverse relationship. So if it's very high frequency, there's a very short wavelength, and vice versa. And we're talking in hertz, and all hertz means is cycles per second, back and forth a second. Okay, so for instance, your electricity supply in the US is 60 hertz a second. In Europe here, it's 50 hertz a second. So back and forth 60 times a second. A megahertz, 1 million times a second. A gigahertz, a billion times a second. Cell phones work in gigahertz, a billion times a second, or it can be like 8 to 900 megahertz. So nearly a billion times a second. And that is obviously very difficult to comprehend. That it can go, that anything can go that fast, but there are actually many things in the universe which travel way faster than that even. So EMFs in your brain, let's talk about that. So what there is to understand is actually EMFs zap your head. Most of the research here is on what's called RF radiation. So what I actually mean is radio frequency microwave radiation. This is what your cell phone uses. And cell phone manuals not that anybody really looks at a cell phone manual, but there is, if you actually look in there, it will say radio frequency microwave radiation. So that is the most complete term, and everything like cell phones, Wi-Fi, anything smart, it's all using radio frequency radiation. So most of the research on this particular, how EMFs impact your brain, is looking on this radio frequency radiation. Your brain is about 75% water. It's very fragile, and the skull is there to protect your brain from bangs and knocks. Okay, so I'm not teaching you anything there you don't know. But maybe what you don't know is that you have also a blood-brain barrier, okay, blood-brain barrier, BBB, and that is another really important form of protection, and it's got two roles. Firstly, to prevent toxins from getting into your brain, and also allowing your brain to get the essential nutrients that it needs to function. So it's like this protective sheath which surrounds your brain, protects your brain. Now, here's the thing, unfortunately, is that EMFs zap your blood-brain barrier. Okay, and this is not a new thing. This has been known about since the 1970s. Dr. Alan Frey, who was doing research for the military as well. You'd think, well, hey, if you're doing the work for the military, at least the military could have done is really, share this information with people. But far from that, they tried to they tried to put the lid on all of this. And so what Dr. Alan Frey actually found was that cell phone radiation of the type which, this radio frequency radiation, which cell phones are using, can damage the blood-brain barrier. And he did this, and he did it again, and he did it again and again, because when he found this out, he couldn't believe it. And this damage, what he found was it came from very short-term exposures. In fact, such short-term exposures that it begins almost immediately. So what we're saying here is you've got the cell phone against your head, then the damage is starting pretty much instantaneously. So this blood-brain barrier, this BBB, is vital in protecting your brain from toxins. And because, that's the thing, is once the toxins get in there, it's really bad news. And all kind, chemical toxins, heavy metals, and then we've got this interaction between these EMFs, these electromagnetic fields, which are just all around us, and particularly when you're putting a cell phone against them. That's why people do fall sick and get this thing called electrical hypersensitivity, or it can be other diseases, it can be Alzheimer's, it can be Parkinson's, or whatever, brain tumors or whatever, because we've got this interaction between this EMF, which I call the mother of all toxins, and whatever other toxin is in there. So this EMF damage has been confirmed, to the blood-brain barrier, has now been confirmed by dozens of studies. Okay, so it's no mystery, it's no secret, and yet here I'm talking about it. You probably never heard of it, but there it is.
Well, and Lloyd, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I've sort of learned to think about this is we're operating in the gigahertz range for a lot of these frequencies, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, and typically 2.4 gigahertz is kind of a common thing we might see in the US anyway. The microwave oven operates in that same range, correct?
Exactly.
And we've been, I don't think it's a mystery at this point to recognize the dangers of the microwave oven if we're standing too close to it, if it's leaking radiation. And the reason I like to bring up the microwave oven is because we can immediately visualize, if you were to put a CD, this is something I did when I was a kid, put a CD in a microwave oven, sparks go everywhere. If you put tinfoil in a microwave oven, sparks are going everywhere. If you put water or a piece of chicken in the microwave oven, these things heat up instantly, and it's impacting the water, the proteins in the chicken. And so I just use that as a way to visualize how these same types of frequencies are impacting the metals that are in me, whether they're in my teeth or in my brain, or if they're in my, wherever, and also the water that's makes up most of my being, right? Is that a good sort of way to sort of...
It is, but it's
visualize?
even worse than that, Jason. It's even worse than that. So it's the same frequency, but this is pulsed digital modulated radiation. So what I'm saying by all of that, and it's a little confusing, is that it's highly complex, this radiation. So it's the same frequency, but it's different because, these cell phones are amazing devices, and the technology is just mind-blowing. And as time goes on, it's getting more and more mind-blowing. And to make, to be able to, like with 5G, download a Hollywood movie in a heartbeat, there is a lot going on. So in terms of frequency, the frequencies are the same, which according to certain experts, 2.4 gigahertz is particularly biologically damaging. So why did they choose that these almost same frequencies for cell phones? And the point is that cell phone radiation is complex and is pulsed, and we know that this pulsing effect and all kinds of other little tricks, if you want, of the trade that the engineers have been using to make cell phones do what they do, make it even worse for us. It's really bad news. So what does this all mean? This EMFs, it's zapping your blood-brain barrier. So what does that mean? Well, headaches. That's one outcome. A 2017 study reviewed nearly 3,000 previous studies going back to 1990 found a dose response relationship between the risk of having a headache and the duration of cell calls and frequency, the number of calls. So what we mean by dose response relationship is like the more that you're using your phone and the more you're on your phone, then the more people were getting their headaches. So that's a significant study because it reviewed, it's like a meta study, it's reviewing the other studies. So why headaches? We don't exactly know, but we know it causes inflammation in the meninges. And that is a possible explanation, but we don't exactly know why this is. We don't have the answers to everything on this, but we do know there are lots of dangers, which I'm going to share with you. Very clear.
We don't even understand headaches very well as a medical community, right? I mean, when we drink too much, we get a headache the next day, and there's lots of theories as to why. So it doesn't surprise me that we don't know why it causes that symptom, but because we don't know a lot of these things, right? So
we don't know a lot of these things, but so the industry is twisting this to say. And I'm sorry if I'm like, it sounds as though I'm being unkind, but I'm just telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. And, this is, my mission is to tell the truth, and share solutions, help people on this, because I've seen what the industry is doing and I don't like their practices. So somebody needs to tell the truth. And yeah, so it's, so the industry is saying, well, yeah, we don't understand everything. We need more studies. Therefore, we can carry on using our cell phone willy-nilly. Sorry, I don't agree. Not at all. And by the end of this presentation, you'll probably understand why I don't agree. So EMFs in your brain. So what we also know is, and this is research, okay, a big study, $25 million study, interphone study, 2010, get this, okay, using your cell phone just 30 minutes a day can increase your risk of getting a brain tumor by 40%. Just 30 minutes a day. 2010 study, okay, you might think what cell phones were like back in 2010, not very sophisticated at all. Not all this, fancy bells and whistles stuff, which we've got going on now. And already we're saying 30 minutes a day can increase your risk of getting, brain cancer by 40%, which is massive, massive. A UK study on 790,000 middle-aged women found that women who use their cell phones for 10 or more years were 2.5 times more likely to develop an acoustic neuroma, which is a tumor of the auditory nerve in the ear. Their risk of the risk of increased with the number of years they use a cell phone. So the more they was using the cell phone, the more this risk increased. Long-term use doubles the risk of brain tumors on the same side of the head where the phone is held. So that's what the Mayo Clinic found in one of their studies. There's been lots of other studies on this, ipsilateral tumors, they call it. How can that be? If cell phones are safe, why are we getting tumors same side of head that people are using the cell phone? NTP study, National Toxicology Program study, $30 million US study funded by taxpayers. They wanted to put this to rest, say once and for all, cell phones are safe. Sorry, folks, they found they couldn't say anything else because, these, and they tried to actually say something else because when they publish a study, another thing that they're doing is they're couching it in certain terms, and then those certain terms are couched in other terms when it's reported in the media. But actually, the bottom line is evidence of increased risk of glioma, which are malignant tumors of the brain. And if you want to see more of these studies and read more about these studies, well, you can go to my website, electricsense.com, obviously, or you can go to the bioinitiative.org. So Bioinitiative report, an independent body, which first published the report in 2017, like the 2007, I beg your pardon. The 2007 report was over 600 pages. I don't know how many pages it is now, something like 2,000 pages. It's pretty dry, but all the science is there, not all of it, but a lot of science, thousands of studies reviewed, peer-reviewed, independent studies, not any old studies, not studies paid for by the cell phone industry, peer-reviewed independent studies. So let's talk about your gut. So we've understood what's happening a little bit with the brain, and there's much more research on that. I mean, in the Bioinitiative report, for instance, there's entire sections on how it's impacting the blood-brain barrier and how it's creating brain tumors, the association with brain tumors. And so there is, I'm just giving a very quick overview in the time we've got here today. So I want to talk about the gut also. So the gut. So there's a nice picture of the gut. No, it's not, is it really? But anyway, we live in a symbiotic relationship with many, many microorganisms, about 100 trillion. I don't think anybody's ever counted them, but there's a lot. Okay. The microbiome is actually in every cell of our body. Okay. So we kind of thinking, because I was thinking for quite a while that it was just in our gut, but it's not just in our gut, it's everywhere. We've got like a microbiome of our eye, of our nose, of our tongue, of our teeth, of everything. But the gut has a large amount of the microbiome, that is for sure. We have something like 1,000 species of different microorganisms in our gut, okay? So the gut-brain links. So these microorganisms make about 30 neurotransmitters in the gut. There's like chemical messengers. Our gut is actually our second brain. I'm sure you know this, Jason. I'm sure you've talked about this, but obviously because you're focusing on this in your masterclass, so I'm not teaching you anything here. But your microbiome in your gut controls, so modulates the microbiome in your brain. Okay, it's actually the gut is it seems though in some ways it's more important than the brain. That's what I'm seeing. That's what my take on this. So the gut-brain immune system. So these 30 neurotransmitters in the gut, they're like your seed of immunity, so to speak, because your gut contains approximately, some say 70%, some say 80, some say 90, but let's say 80, something like that. 80% of your body's immune system, that is the basis of your immune system, is your gut. And so if you disrupt your gut microbiome, then that leads to dis-ease. No, I say dis-ease because I don't like using the words particularly. I find it fairer to use this state of non-ease. Okay, dis-ease. That's what I mean by that. And that there's a whole load of diseases which are linked to that, notably autoimmune diseases. So this gut-brain issue. So it causes. The causes of the gut-brain disruption are many, okay? So poor diet, obviously, Western diet and, processed foods, GMOs, all that, that's one factor. Pesticides, herbicides, Roundup, things like that's another one. Antibiotics, which can cause gut membrane permeability. And the result of all this, and other things too, okay? But the result of all this is the gut is unable to make neurotransmitters as it should, which can then lead to chronic disease further down the line. So it's a kind of it tends to be a softly thing, which happens over years. You're actually not aware of anything. You're fine. Like with me, fine. Well, with me, a bit different because I was fine. Then one day, boom, not fine. And I thought that we became a living hell. But actually, then I realized how blessed I was to be able to actually knew that these EMFs, I didn't have to do the research, actually. I just knew that the EMFs were very bad news for me. So the big overlooked factor, okay, which is not on this slide, okay, so these are multifactorial causes. I've talked about all that. But the big overlooked factor is EMFs, electromagnetic fields. And so we have this double whammy because EMFs tend to cause bad bacteria to overgrow on the one hand. They reduce the amount of good bacteria in the microbiome on the other hand, which means that we can't digest like we should, we can't absorb food like we should, we can't make vitamins and all this, which obviously that cascades down into other issues. And then we have what I call a double whammy, for want of a better expression, which means EMFs may also cause the good bacteria to become pathogenic or that's to say, to turn them into bad gut bacteria. So the good guys become the bad guys. And EMFs, the second thing is EMFs can increase the proliferation of pathogens and make them more resistant to antibiotics, which is rather a huge issue.
So it sounds like what you're saying with this is that EMFs, this radiation that we're getting from the environment, is changing the genetic expression, the phenotype and the genotype, even perhaps, of these bacteria, these even fungi, right? I've even seen mold that becomes more virulent, more pathogenic, more expressive when you radiate it, right? So is that kind of what we're implying here, is that it's changing the expression of all these organisms that live within us, so that they're doing things that may not be in our best interest in terms of symptoms and function.
Exactly. So it's like a spanner in the works. The whole EMF thing is a spanner in the works of this really a rather wonderful thing we call the human body or the human existence. And we've not evolved to deal with this spanner in the works. And this spanner is getting bigger. It's growing. Not only when you're not taking the spanner out of the works, it's like it's growing into a monster. And this is where we're going, through notably the wireless exposures, but let's not forget the wired, please. So E. coli, for instance, is one form of bacteria that can become negative. So just to give you an example, where we've got studies, E. coli is one form of bacteria that can become negative and pathogenic when it's is overgrown in a state of dysbiosis. So E. coli is associated with conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, and other stomach issues, just to situate that. And one study, a 2017 study, found that when bacteria like E. coli is exposed to cell phone radiation and Wi-Fi radiation, its growth rate was significantly faster. And it also found that within a 6-hour window after exposure, the bacteria was more resistant to antibiotics. Now, antibiotic resistance is, according to certain experts, one of the most important threats to global health. And I certainly share the view that it is really important, because, you know, if you do have a health problem, and sometimes the only thing which does seem to work, I know I don't use personally, I don't use antibiotics, but I've noticed with people around me, friends and family, that they do, and like it's like what just kind of saves them, it just like miraculously brings them back to life. Well, that's what we will be foregoing if we continue doing what we're doing. They just won't work, and this is a growing problem.
That's a great point, because antibiotics have saved millions and millions and millions of lives, right? So it's clearly not something we want to be taking long term. It's clearly not a solution to the grand issues, but as a stopgap, as something that's going to be helpful in a crisis scenario, they're very, very beneficial. And the last thing we want to do is make them ineffective, right? So I think it's a really, really important point.
Exactly. A bit like drugs and surgery. It's not something you want to do every day, but boy, it can be life-saving when you really need it.
Exactly.
So EMF mechanisms. Let's talk about a mechanism. So we do have a mechanism for understanding how EMFs impact our health. And this is thanks to the work of Dr. Martin Paul, Professor Emeritus at Washington State University. And I've done this pretty little flowchart so you get an idea of how that works. So EMF exposures, what they can do, and what's really clear mechanism that we have a clear understanding of how they impact our body, how they impact our biology, is that they cause the calcium channels in the cells to stay open. These things which Dr. Martin Paul calls them the voltage-gated calcium channels, the VGCCs, which are like these little gateways that should let correct amounts of calcium in and out of the cells. And the problem is that EMFs mess up this mechanism. And we have, because too much calcium is let into the cells, We have a whole load of downstream effects from that, notably creation of free radicals, oxidative stress, which is huge, which leads to a number of adverse bio effects, which at some point down the line can lead to serious disease, including, but not just cancer. So I'm saying cancer because that's like a headliner, yeah? But, you know, a long list of serious diseases.
And I want to sort of stay here real quick because, you know, your site is called electricsense.com. And I love that because from my view, the body is electric. You know, it operates through electric charges, these exchanges of charges, right? And this goes back to organic chemistry and these type of things. And even the original design of the battery, right, was really just using very, very basic electrochemistry. And so this to me is so important to recognize about how the body operates, because if it's operating in an electric way, you know, just shuttling charges back and forth, then that really simplifies this very complex thing. And we can start to look at calcium as a charge carrier. We can start to look at sulfur as a charge carrier. You know, these things are really just signaling the body in a very, very complex way using electric charge. And so as we start to change that expression, then it's going to start causing the cells to do different things, right? So it's really just kind of as simple as that. And I sort of use that cautioningly because the body's insanely complex. But when you start messing with the charges, this charge state of the cells and how it functions, then all kinds of things are going to start going haywire. And
exactly.
We're going to get basically chaos at the cellular level, right?
So, exactly, which is what's happening, which is what disease is, or incoherence. You know, we talk about coherence and incoherence. So we and another word for that is harmony. So we need harmony. We need harmony and we need balance. And this just screws things up, Jason. These EMFs. And so when you understand that actually we're all walking around with a biofield. I mean, this is science. Again, I'm quoting science here. National Institutes of Health since 1994 recognize this, that we're surrounded by a biofield. We're interacting with this biofield, and this biofield has the information from which we are formed, which we become physical beings. And so the fundamental thing is that these EMFs are distorting this biofield, distorting this energy exchange, this information exchange, which then is distorting these chemical reactions, which then is distorting our health, which then at some point is creating disease.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the mechanism, so wireless exposures create these free radicals, carbonyl free radicals, that cause virtually identical damage to this ionizing radiation. So I'm back to that, I'm sorry. But ionizing, non-ionizing radiations, what a complete joke that was invented after the Second World War, and which we're not allowed to question, but obviously we're here to question. And so the damage is basically the same actually between ionizing and non-ionizing. So that's to say the damage that you're doing to yourself from your cell phone, from your Wi-Fi, from all these devices, and from wired exposures, which I'll clarify that if you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about, is nearly identical to the damage from nuclear radiation, from medical x-rays. It's nearly the same. It just does it in a different way. And this damage is, it includes, but this is not an exhaustive list, it includes damage to your DNA, which is like the blueprint from your cells, to your damage to your cell membranes, to your proteins, to your stem cells, and to your mitochondria. Yes, we're going to talk about the mitochondria.
So this ionizing, non-ionizing was basically just an imaginary line in the sand that they drew, which is essentially irrelevant when it comes to the function of the body. It's just maybe a matter of degree, and quickly we've I think crossed over this imaginary barrier, because while individual uses of things may be hard to tell the effects, we're now swimming in a sea of this stuff, right? And we can't even calculate the effects as far as I can tell. Because it's everywhere. You know, when I turn on my phone, I can pop open 30 Wi-Fi signals that I can potentially latch onto, right? So it's like at this point, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore.
Mm-hmm. And so this is the challenge. And again, I'm incredibly blessed because I can walk around and I can sense these frequencies and lots of, so I'm just actually, initially I thought I was just sensitive to EMFs, and then I realized I was sensitive to energy, and which can be a blessing, which can be a curse. But, and there are lots of people actually sensitive to energy, but they don't realize it. I realize it, and I can now deal with it. And that's what I'm going to share with you, how to deal with it. But yeah, so these, yeah, it's a silent killer. It really is. And it sounds maybe as though I'm being melodramatic, but I'm looking, you know, I've looked at the research, I've done my homework on this, believe me. And, you know, just you go look for yourself. And I'm not saying to you particularly, Jason, because I know you've done your research too, but just folks, do your research on this. And it's really rather concerning. And that is an understatement.
And sorry
and I'm being polite.
Sorry to interrupt again. And I know you want to move through your slides here, but
Yeah.
a thought just popped into my mind, you know, in comparison, it's to me, it's almost like, you know, eating a Snickers or drinking a Coke, right? One of those, it's bad for my body. We know this. This is not debatable anymore. Was one going to kill me? No. But now as I eat 2 and I eat 3, and if I eat 10 in a day, now we're starting to cause a problem. But even 10 in a day is not going to kill me in a day, and it's not probably going to cause disease even in a year, maybe. But over time, as I increase the dose and I increase the pervasiveness or the length at which I'm applying this stuff, now we're going to start to see diseases, right? So I kind of maybe thinking about this in the same way, where it's like there's a quantitative and a qualitative aspect to all this. And we know that a Coca-Cola or Snickers is bad for me, but we don't really think about it in terms of Wi-Fi in the same way. But I think we probably should.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we can make that comparison with a Coke. Honestly, for me,
I understand.
we can't compare what EMFs are doing to a Coke and a Snicker bar. We cannot. It's way more pervasive than that. Again, because we're going back to the energy thing. We're going back to the biofield.
Basics,
we're going
right?
back to, we are subtle energy beings, and we are interacting with other subtle energy beings and other beings all the time. Everything has a vibration. We have a vibration, and everything has it. Plants have a vibration. Your chair has a vibration. Everything has a vibration. And this is what we're learning. This is where science is taking us, this understanding. And that we're living in this information field. We're back to the information aspect. And that these electromagnetic fields are disturbing this communication of information. You don't get that with a Coke and a Snickers bar.
Fair enough. Love it.
So yeah, so the mitochondria, let's talk about the mitochondria. Mitochondria, as you know, I'm sure, Jason, are energy factories, like energy plants, little power stations, which you contain inside your cells, which create ATP, amongst other things. They don't just do that, but that's ATP is the energy currency of our cells. And according to Nick Lane in his book, Power, Sex and Suicide, they pump out 10,000 times more energy gram for gram than the sun. So pretty powerful. And you can only be as healthy as your mitochondria. That's why we're talking about this today. And that's why we talk about the mitochondria more and more, is because it's you know, the reflection, your mitochondria is a reflection of your health. So there's somewhere between 10 quadrillion and 100 quadrillion mitochondria inside your body. That's to say a lot. And that's to say also that we are, in terms of numbers, more mitochondria than anything else, it would seem. This is what the latest science is saying. And again, you can only be as healthy as your mitochondria. So knowing what's going on with your mitochondria, having a healthy mitochondria is really important. Yeah.
And there's no, I would go so far and sort of reiterate that point and say that there's no disease where the mitochondria are not impacted or playing a role in that disease process or that dysfunction process. They are always playing that role.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So mitochondria. So why is it relevant to this conversation? Why is it particularly relevant? Well, EMFs can damage your mitochondria. That's why it's relevant. You know, I was going to say that. I guess that is a pretty safe bet. And they can do it in several ways by causing mitochondrial dysfunction via a radical increase in oxidative stress. So back to this thing, oxidative stress, which is, according to many experts, the root cause of many diseases. And it can also impair, EMFs can also impair mitochondrial function of the eggs and sperm, thus impairing fertility. And that's also obviously a really big deal, because looking at the stats, I don't know if you've seen them recently, but it's not reassuring at all. And when we know that, again, we've got a whole bunch of studies on how EMFs impact women's eggs and impact men's sperm, erectile dysfunction, a whole load of things like that. So fertility is a big issue here. And EMFs can also damage your mitochondria by increasing the calcium inside your mitochondria, inside the mitochondria itself. So not just inside the cell, but inside the mitochondria, which can lead to a lowered ability to generate this thing, ATP, this energy currency of the body, and increase oxidative stress again, which can lead to other things like premature cell death. So why is this important? Because mitochondrial dysfunction, as you've just said, is at the core of many diseases like cancer and so on and so forth. Yeah, headline diseases, many diseases. So solutions, we're going to talk about solutions. Again, wireless and wired. I'm highlighting that because I want people to remember this, wireless and wired. So we're going to look at both aspects here. So wireless, the obvious one, your cell phone. Why am I talking about cell phone? Because pretty much everybody's got one except me. I do actually borrow one, like if I'm going out on my own in the car or something like that, because yeah, they are really handy. But we need to know how to use a cell phone safely. And I'm going to give you my #1 recommendation. Yes, and it is to stop using a cell phone. So that is a choice. And so I don't think you're going to stop using a cell phone today. But maybe at some point you're going to kind of put 2 and 2 together on this and just realize, you know, what bad news it is. And certainly that is, for me, something to aim at. And again, another, you know, the health effects aside, another great reason to stop using a cell phone. One of my reasons for not having a cell phone is I don't want to be feeding money to those critters. Okay, the cell phone industry, I do not want to be doing that. I do not want to be supporting this rollout of, which I know is just impacting men, women, and children in such a fundamental and profound way. So yeah, so the cell phone is the worst offender for most people, and we need to protect ourselves from it. And yeah, so stop using cell phone is drastic, but okay, so there's other things we can do if you don't want to. So I'll just throw that in there as my first recommendation, my top recommendation. So how to use a cell phone more safely, which is a more reasonable proposition for most people. Yeah, limiting calls is the obvious one. Not putting the darn thing next to your head, okay, not next to your brain, because as we've learned, the studies, the science is pretty clear on this, independent studies again. So we don't want it next to our brain. We want to use it away. Distance is your friend. There's this exponential effect with all EMFs. The further you are from the source, the device, the better. Okay, and it's not just a bit better, it's a lot better, and that's all exponential means. Prefer to text, not talk. So that doesn't mean go crazy with the texting either, because I've got people, you know, if you look at my website electricsense.com, there is thousands of comments on there from people talking about how EMFs have impacted their lives, people from all walks of life, from, you know, road sweepers to top level attorneys, policemen, scientists, electrical engineers who thought they know all about this, you know, really people from all walks of life, which they've just been caught out by this thing because sadly, again, our governments and industry are not telling the truth. So you have to protect yourself and again, protect your children. So prefer to text, not talk. Avoid using your cell phone next to your ear. Use speakerphone if you can. If you can't, then there are other things you can buy, like an air tube headset. That's a recommendation, air tube headset, which is actually better, way safer than a wired headset. So more free and easy tips, go easy on the apps. Why? Because more apps going means more radiation. The more it's backing and forth in with the cell tower, with these different wireless functionalities, lots of different wireless functionality. The more apps you've got on there, the more apps you've got activated, installed, then the more active it is and the worse it is for you. Avoid streaming. Avoid streaming. Streaming, you know, I can feel the streaming. That's the thing I can feel the most. It's like watching videos on YouTube and all that. Download stuff, then watch it. Don't stream, okay? Don't stream things. That takes a lot of bandwidth, makes your phone work really hard. Delay putting it to your ear if you are putting it to your ear. Actually, I don't like putting it to your ear at all. I don't see why you should, but if you are putting it to your ear, delay. So it's making the connection before you actually get it to your ear. So it's doing most of the work before it goes to your ear. Avoid carrying your cell phone directly on your body. Carry it away from your body, because even if you've got all wireless switched off, then you are still possibly exposing yourself to magnetic fields from the battery at close proximity. So you don't want that. You don't want it in your energy field, in your biofield. You just don't want it. Bad news. Get wise about the bars. So I've got a little picture here of the bars on your cell phone. You want the maximum bars. The more bars there are, the better. Go bar crazy. Because the more bars there are, the better the signal, the stronger the signal. If you're like down to 1 bar, that means your cell phone is pumping out a lot of radiation to make the connection. Avoid carrying your cell phone directly on your body. Again, because of radio frequency radiation.
So
and
sorry, Lloyd. I want to highlight what you just said there, just in case it's not quite clear to some people, because this is a really profound insight that when I learned about it, I thought, oh wow, we should all know this. And so just to clarify, what you were saying is that when we see low bars on our cell phone, that means that there's not a great connection nearby. We don't have a great cell connection. So in response to that, my phone is now going to basically pump out a ton of radiation to try to go and grab a signal so that it can make a call and that kind of thing, right? So if the signal is weak, that means my phone is going to be putting out tons of radiation. And this is why when we don't have great connections, the battery drains so fast, right? Because the cell phone's just pumping out tons of energy to try to latch onto a signal that's hopefully nearby. Is that right?
That is exactly right.
Okay.
And that is exactly why you shouldn't be using it in a moving vehicle either, because it's working overtime to work out where the nearest cell phone towers. Oh, it's not that one anymore. Now it's that one. And it's doing all this. So it is amazing technology. But so in a moving vehicle, in any vehicle, in fact, because it's like it's a sealed metal enclosure, or resembles one, which is like a Faraday cage. And this is, we can actually protect ourselves from radio frequency radiation, these different exposures, with a Faraday cage. There are people that do this. They're extremely sensitive. And so if a vehicle in itself works similar to a Faraday cage, and a moving vehicle is like a moving Faraday cage. So you're really bad news for your cell phone. So like the summon would be driving down the motorway, what you call the freeway, with downloading a movie or streaming a movie. that's like the summum. That is like summum bad news. And the people are doing this. People are doing this every day. Very,
Right.
very bad news for you and for everybody in your car. Again, back to the children thing. We're not really talked about this, but children, the research tells us that children are particularly vulnerable to these exposures. And I have some not pretty graphics on my website where we see a thermal representation of a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an adult, and we can see that the 5-year-old, the brain is much more affected by these exposures than a 10-year-old or an adult.
And this makes sense too, right? Because children are their nervous system is not fully myelinated, meaning they don't have, like, if you imagine electric wire, we have those plastic coverings, which sort of act as a shield, right, for the carrier of that electricity. And when the nerves aren't myelinated, now we have basically a blank wire, and now these EMFs can interact with our nervous system in a more profound way. We're seeing greater calcium efflux. We're seeing the voltage gated calcium channels open up more, and there's a greater interaction, right?
Exactly. And not just that, but the thing to remember is that children are not small adults.
Right.
Okay. They're biologically, they're not small adults. They're not formed, and they shouldn't be exposed to these wireless frequencies and man-made wired frequencies too. So never sleep. So here's one really, one for teenagers and young people. Never sleep with a cell phone switched on, but older people too, because I know they're doing this. Sleeping. How many people are using their cell phone as an alarm clock? You know, with the thing switched on that people can call like 3 a.m. in the morning. Geez, why do you want to get a call at 3 a.m. in? You know, okay, if it's life or death. But put that thing away from you, away, as far away as you can, and still hear it if you need to be contacted at 3 a.m.
And what about phones that are in airplane mode that are on?
Well, that's what I'm going to come to, and I think that's my next slide. So yeah, make airplane mode your best friend. So your phone's got 3 different kinds of wireless functionality, if not more. Okay, and so that's the cellular, which will be the 3G, the 4G, or the 5G, the Bluetooth, and the Wi-Fi. And it might have other functionalities too, like GPS, which could be creating a signal as well. And so if you put you shouldn't, but it could. I was affected by GPS. So if you put your phone in airplane mode, on most phones, this will turn off the radiation of all radiation of emissions. On some phones, it won't. So you need to actually go in to the settings. In fact, it seems like they're not making this easy. So you have to fiddle around to do this. So you have to, understand that there's different kinds of wireless functionality, and understand also when there are software updates that this can cancel this airplane mode. What you're doing. So you have to be a bit of an airplane mode freak. When you're using your cell phone, this is where you want to be, in and out of airplane mode all the time, as much as possible, and really just switching it on for emergencies. That's what I recommend, using it in emergencies.
I will say, Lloyd, to me, this is the easiest, perhaps not the best solution, right? The best solution is get rid of your cell phone, right? Like you mentioned, and perhaps even go back to one of those old flip phones, right? Like, I mean, even just making steps that way is really, really great. But for most of us who want to maintain the benefits of cell phones and apps and podcasts and, these things, these modern conveniences that we enjoy, to me, this is the most effective solution. And this is how I operate personally, is I got my phone in airplane mode almost all the time, because that allows me to take a break from it, step away from it. And then when I want to use it, I flip it on, I check my text messages, perhaps any other messages that might come through WhatsApp or whatever the case is. If I want to listen to podcasts, I will download podcasts with my phone generally away from me. And when it's done downloading, essentially, I come back, I turn it into airplane mode, and then I listen to the podcast and I go for a walk or whatever the case might be. And so I think what I want to impart to the listeners and viewers here is, you don't have to be perfect. Taking steps to get toward perfect, I think is really my objective. And I think anything that we can do these days is beneficial. And I just love this one because to me, it just makes the most sense for those of us who want to keep cell phones.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So perfect is not good. You know,
Yes.
perfect is, we can't, it's unhealthy to be striving for perfect. So this, yeah, it's
And it helps
airplane
break the
mode is,
habit. Yeah, it helps
it
break the habit
rocks.
of phones, right? Because
You know,
really we're all addicted.
yeah.
I mean, we're
We're
all,
addicted. We're addicted, and you know, literally, cell phones are creating certain neurotransmitters which are causing addiction.
yes.
You know, this is it's literally causing addiction. Like people say, I'm addicted, but they are. They are creating neurotransmitters which making you go back, and you know, and then you've got like the effect of social media and what that can do, and you know, keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, as we say in English, Queen's English anyway. All this, we don't. This is what I'm asking you to do: is to question this, please. Question how important, because it is attractive, it is seductive, but boy, is it danger? The dangers are real. The dangers are real, and it's for most people, it's a softly long-term danger thing. So, two reasons why Wi-Fi is particularly harmful. So I'm going to talk about, Wi-Fi. Beware of Wi-Fi, because that's the other big one. Yeah. So first one is the cell phone. Second one is Wi-Fi. These wonderful devices, I have to say, in many respects. Again, because it's back to the convenience thing. The technology is seductive. There's a reason why this technology is taking over our lives, because it makes our lives simpler. But there is a downside, and we have to know. You need to know the downside for you and your family, for your kids, for your elders. Share this information. So two reasons why Wi-Fi is particularly harmful. Number one, again, the nature and the complexity of the signal. Remember what I was talking about before when we were talking about the microwave oven? We're making that comparison. So it's the nature and the complexity of the signal. Wi-Fi uses radio frequency, microwave, yes, like microwave oven, literally the same frequency this time, okay? So we was talking about how it was similar before with the cell phones. This is literally the same frequency very often. So we do have now multiple frequencies for Wi-Fi because there's so much of it. The frequency bands are getting saturated, so they're using higher frequencies. And thousands of studies show the adverse effects of this radiation on our health. Most Wi-Fi works with a carrier, so this carrier signal of 2.4 gigahertz, which is then modulated. This is how the carrier signal turns on and off in a certain rhythm. That's what modulation means. It's how the data is transmitted. That's, say, the sounds, the words, and the images, or pulsed. It's a pulsing that is believed to be particularly dangerous. Again, lots of research on this. And yeah.
And Lloyd, I want to sort of stick to that real quick, because as far as I understand, we don't really see this pulsed behavior because, again, electromagnetic radiation and fields, this is natural. This as a concept, it's very, very natural for the biological world. But it's this pulsed function that we don't see in nature, right? And any time that I see or hear something that is not naturally happening in nature, the first thing I do is question, is this harmful? Because biological systems haven't been seeing this for hundreds or thousands or quote unquote millions of years, right? So that's the first signal to me that if I don't see it in nature, then I should be wary of it.
That is exactly it. That is exactly it, Jason. It's that simple. It is that simple. It's common sense. A lot of all this, and the amazing thing is that we are still, so many people are still functioning despite all of these exposures. That is the amazing thing about the human body, is that despite everything we're throwing at it, all this abuse, and so it is the EMFs, and it is the Snickers bars, and it is the Cokes, and it is the rum and Cokes or whatever. It is still, people are still, getting up in the morning and going out to work.
Thriving. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing. So just don't abuse of that. And if you just pull back and start redressing the balance a little bit here, then honestly, you can, in terms of longevity, but perhaps, but more importantly, I think it's quality of life. This is where we're going. And we can see that this is the issue now, is we are living longer, but many people, not just seniors, but people middle-aged and even young people are ill health, an earlier stage. And this is the problem. And I believe this is that EMFs are a major factor in all of this, major. So number 2 reason why Wi-Fi is particularly harmful is because many of us are exposed to it 24/7. So here I am sat in my little office in France here. We don't have Wi-Fi. In fact, we never even had Wi-Fi at home. Because this happened to me. So, we just didn't get it in. I don't know if it probably existed in 2002, but we never had it. And yeah, I'm surrounded by Wi-Fi, obviously, with the neighbor's Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is you go out, and unless you go to a beach or forest or in nature, then you're away from Wi-Fi. But most people, certainly in urban settings, are exposed 24/7, 365 days a year. It's unrelenting. And it's just chipping away.
It's death by 1,000 cuts, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. So how to make your Wi-Fi safer? Move your Wi-Fi router, I say router, beg your pardon, as far away as possible from the rooms where you spend any time. Yeah, your modem router, that thing which allows you to connect to the internet, move that away. If it is a wireless device, move that away from rooms where you spend time. Switch off your Wi-Fi at night. It's not that difficult to do, is it? But yeah, you can forget. And so you could use an app to switch it off. There's an app called Linksys which can do this. You can actually switch it off remotely. So you can use it and then use your app to switch it off with your cell phone and put it back, switch it on and off. But you can see what I recommend here is to buy a mechanical timer, a little mechanical timer. And I actually got this idea. I don't know if I should have painted this, when I had this. I wrote an article in, I don't know, about 2012, 2013 on Wi-Fi. And it came to me with the Christmas tree, because we were using this timer on the Christmas tree lights, and that's where I got the idea for that. And this is quite well known now that so it's a really cheap way of making your Wi-Fi cut off at night. You can go in the settings and try and do it, but again, back to the software updates, it usually means it comes back on. So this mechanical timer really is a really great way of solving that problem.
And they're super cheap. $10,
super cheap,
$20,
$10.
I mean, it's an easy
super
solution.
Cheap, super easy, super easy. You don't have to mess about with that stupid software.
Yep.
So my number 1 recommendation, again, this is hard line because Lloyd takes a harder line than many people that are talking about EMFs. Why? Because I feel it, folks. That's where I'm coming from. I feel this stuff. So my number 1 recommendation with the Wi-Fi is get rid of it. Replace it with this Ethernet connection. Yeah, that's so that does mean you've got wires, but hey, okay, we had wires before. I can remember when, I still got phones in here. They're all wired. I love wires. And so, yeah, we do. Like if you're living somewhere and you don't have this installed, then yeah, you've got visible wires. But if you're renting somewhere, then you've got visible wires perhaps. But there's all kinds of workarounds for this. Really, it's not that big a deal. Just it's a tiny mental blockage maybe that some people have, and it makes actually your internet work way faster.
Yeah, and it's more stable.
More stable, it's private, it's just win-win right the way through. Yep. But most importantly, it's way better for your health.
Well, and when we do things like this, we do a Zoom recording and it requires video and audio, we can't have you be breaking up all the time, right? And this happens when Wi-Fi doesn't function well. And so, when we set these type of interviews up with people, what's one of my requests is that, hopefully you have a stable connection where if you must use Wi-Fi, then it is notably stable, or hopefully you have it wired so that we don't run into these disruptions and these issues, because it's so much more effective. And now that the video platforms and streaming services and all these things are, uploading and using videos at much higher file sizes and qualities, you're transferring so much data over the internet that it does require, a pretty robust connection. So for me, it's just a functional thing where I'm going to be honest, like the tipping point for me was I want my internet to work better for these types of things. So wired was just more critical for that. And yes, of course, much better for my health too. And so it is a win-win. And it generally just, in my opinion, and experience, it requires just a little bit of problem solving. How am I going to use the internet? Where's the computer going to be? How do I get a wire there? Maybe do I have to tuck it around a rug? Do I have to go around the walls on the base? We've got to run it up near the corner. There's solutions, and some of them are more elegant than others, but just a little bit of problem solving can help you figure out how I can get a wired connection in my house where I use my computer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even running the Ethernet outside, covering, running it through a sheath kind of thing. It's possible. It's really not that difficult. And sometimes a little bit of negotiation with your landlord or your partner. They don't quite see eye to, you don't see eye to eye on this issue as to why this is necessary. But yeah, it really is, in my view, totally necessary. Totally. Everybody should be hardwired, and this Wi-Fi should be abolished. Yes. Which that should be the next law we should bring in.
It's probably the I don't want to say unnecessary, but we really just chased that rabbit, didn't we? And it didn't really get us all that far, in my opinion. It's like, I know people are looking at the Internet of Things and they're trying to connect their refrigerator and their TVs and everything's Wi-Fi, but I'm just looking around my own experience. It doesn't really seem to be providing all that much benefit in my world. It's kind of a cool thing, but
yeah, I think it's cost. That's one of the reasons, because it's cheaper and than installing wires all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of situations where Wi-Fi is better, but I don't really have one, because I'm always thinking of the people that are there, with the jobs that are working. I'm thinking, well, yeah, in a cafe, for instance, but what's it doing to your food?
Yeah.
These EMFs, like, they interact with everything, and they interact with your food. So what a microwave oven does to your food? It's at 2.4 gigahertz. Well, Wi-Fi is the same. So it is doing things to your food. It is changing the molecular structure of your food. It's changing the vibration of your food. It is deteriorating the nutritional value of your food, and it's impacting you. And so I really have a difficult time finding any situation where Wi-Fi can be justified, except perhaps very temporary circumstances, outdoor maybe, but no, really wired is the way to go. And it seems like we're going backwards, but we're not. It's an advance.
I actually see the trend is actually starting to lean that way too, for a certain segment of the population, perhaps not the mainstream trends where they want us to follow, but I do see a lot of people are ditching the Wi-Fi and going back to a more wired Ethernet connection. It does seem to be sort of a little trend in that regard.
Yes. So again, I want to talk about the wired now. So we talked about the wireless. We can talk about 5G a little bit if you want. I'm not really, so we can talk about whatever you want on this subject, but I just want to talk about wired, just to headline that a little bit. So it's the less talked about / forgotten aspect of EMFs, these wired exposures. And there are 3 types. There are electric fields, magnetic fields, and dirty electricity. So the big deal is that actually electromagnetic fields on a wire, electrons on a wire, they don't stay on a wire. They permeate out into the room and into you. And this is why it's important. And we've got these different categories. So, all we've talked about them for the time being is just radio frequency radiation. So, but there are actually 3 other categories here, just 3 in one, and it's only a detail in my presentation, but it's an important detail, and that's electric fields, magnetic fields, and dirty electricity, otherwise known as intermediary frequencies. So there's two important properties of electric fields. So electric fields are present when you have a device switched on or not. Switched on or not. For instance, a bedside lamp will emit electric fields regardless of whether the lamp is switched on. There is an electric field, there is a voltage, okay? Electric fields on electrical wiring consistently radiate out 6 to 8 feet consistently. So I'm in a little office here, which is probably like 8 feet by 8 feet maybe. I don't know, it's not that big. So I'm surrounded by all this. I'm doing great. But we're in it, you know, we are in it. So I take my precautions, and I do a lot of energy work around this. And this is the only, and I also deal with the dirty electricity, and this is the only, and I'm careful about the magnetic fields. So I'm, you know, I know I'm controlling, I'm monitoring these exposures. I know what they are. So yeah, so this electric field, it goes through, you know, drywall, most building materials, plastic jacketed circuit, wiring. We can shield it, and in actual commercial buildings, it is shielded. It is regular. That's required in the US, for instance. I know, but in homes, not. How crazy is that? So why, you know, why am I talking? So, you know, electric fields. I'm talking about electric fields, and why am I talking about electric fields, particularly? Because they're a micro stressor. We're back to this chip, the 1,000 COTS thing, you know, you were talking about. And this can lead to many different things, like notably insomnia, nightmares, fatigue, low immunity, and many diseases as well, or diseases. So what can you do? So here's what you can do. It's a 7-day challenge. I'm going to put down the quote to you folks that are watching, that are listening. You go to your breaker panel, which is that panel which where you have these trip switches. Depends what it, you know, where you live as to what it looks like exactly, but it probably looks something like this picture here. And you would switch off the bedroom circuit. How do you know what the bedroom circuit is? Well, maybe it's marked, maybe it's not marked, maybe it's trial and error. It's safe to do this, okay? So you don't want to be doing, you don't want to be playing around with this for, you know, this is not like a permanent solution. It's a temporary solution. It's to gain an understanding as to what's going on. So for 7 days, I want you to switch off that bedroom circuit. And this will probably eliminate electric fields, magnetic fields, and dirty electricity when you're sleeping. This is major, folks. This is a major advance here. If you can do this, major progress in your EMF mitigation, is because when you sleep, you know, 8 hours of nighttime exposures do not equal 8 hours of daytime exposures. A whole load of bodily processes going on, cellular processes, regeneration, rejuvenation, detoxification, secretion of melatonin, which we know that EMFs impact when you are sleeping in this room where we have this electric field. So, you know, just think about where your bed is, right? Even if you've got nothing in there, I bet you've got a light switch. I bet you've got a lamp. And if you don't have a lamp, I bet you've got a light switch. I bet you've got electrical wiring running behind your bed. I bet you're in that 6 to 8 feet space, which I'm talking about. Think like Superman, okay? X-ray vision. It could be next door even, the 6 to 8 feet. 6 to 8 feet. Are you sleeping in an electric field from next door? Maybe you want to switch off multiple circuits. Try this. There's no guarantees because so what I teach is like more advanced stuff is, and it's not that more advanced, but it's actually measuring. So all this is a little bit flimsy. It's a little bit guesswork because really to actually make any serious progress with this whole thing, we actually need to measure, which is not difficult at all. And some very good meters, inexpensive meters, which can help you gain an understanding of these exposures. So that's my 7-day challenge. You switch it off for 7 days, that circuit or multiple circuits, you know, which are surrounding you. Why? Because you want to reduce this electric field. And if you reduce this electric field, then again, it's win-win. Why would you wanting to be sleeping in electric field? And it's not just the electric field, it's magnetic field, dirty electricity mitigation also. So
and this is kind of a fun one, to be honest, because and just for those maybe who aren't super familiar with electrical panels and breakers and all this stuff, you know, what I would maybe recommend is go turn on the lights in your bedroom, and then you can go down to the breaker box. And really what you're doing when you flip these switches, you know, don't stick your hand in the panels and that kind of thing. Hopefully it's a safe box, but there should be switches, and those switches are just like light switches, right? I mean, that's really all you're doing is on and off on electric circuits. So it's just like a light switch for a number of different electrical runs, perhaps in the house. And you can just see if it's not marked, okay, did my light go out in my bedroom? You know, if so, then you know, generally you've got that bedroom. And sometimes there might be multiple. There might be two breakers that require that are control the bedroom. And then just to sort of reiterate what Lloyd was saying, because I had an old house and the electric wiring was just a mess. And so even though I would switch off my breaker for all the bedroom stuff, there's actually other wires running through my bedroom walls that controlled other rooms. And so even though I needed to switch off those two to get rid of all the electricity that was affecting my bedroom. So to sort of, you know, reiterate your point, that's why the measuring is so important, because you just don't know what's behind your wall sometimes and where the wires are running and all that kind of stuff. So it can be a little bit tricky and a little bit interesting, but generally speaking, you can find which breaker controls your bedroom just by, you know, seeing which lights go on and off, and is there plug, you know, does this plug have power when I turn this one off, and that kind of thing. So
exactly. And again, just to be clear, I'm not giving a cast iron guarantee here that it's going to be better, that everything's going to be better, you're going to sleep better, or it's going to solve anything. But I'm saying in most cases it is, because in some cases there might be an imbalance in your electrical wiring, and it might actually create a higher electric field stroke magnetic field, more dirty, well, not, that would surprise me, but higher electric field, higher magnetic field, certainly that's possible. So it's not a guarantee. You test, you suck it and see kind of thing. And that's it. That's really all I wanted to share with you. I know I've gone over time a little bit here today, but I hope this information has been useful. And you can find out more about what I do at my website, electricsense.com. I have written a book which is censored, which is on certain platforms, which is available on my website. And I have more detailed information, more detailed programs, but honestly, a lot of free information on my website. First thing is a free report to get your head around this thing. There is a bit of a learning curve. And at the same time, it's not rocket science, but you have to, I think once people begin to understand just how profound these exposures are, what a profound effect they can have on your life, then you've got the motivation to actually do something about it.
I love that. And, you know, you presented us with a ton of material, and I know it can be overwhelming for some, because especially if you haven't dove into this quite yet, you're not sure where to start, and there's just a million things, and it sounds like you're doomed, and you know, it can be a little overwhelming. But I love the fact that you know, generally gave us a really good overview of all the things, because I think it's important to recognize how many of those things do impact us. Because some of our health issues really are mysterious, and we can't get to the bottom of them until something like this. Oh, I didn't realize, you know, like yourself, how long did you go before you realized, oh my God, this is really the root of so many of my symptoms. And as I, you know, eliminated that or reduced that, it allowed me to move forward in new ways. Right. So I think sometimes we just don't know what's really sort of pinning us down. You know, it may not be the only thing, and it may not even be the source 15 or 20 years ago, but it may be the thing that's pinning us down right now. So I think it's just super important to highlight these things, because you might be one of those people that just isn't sleeping for whatever reason, and you're taking all the things and you're doing all the right things, and you just didn't realize that having your Wi-Fi router in the corner, in your closet, in your bedroom, may be the thing that's creating that disruption, right?
Absolutely. And I've heard stories time and time again, literally that. A Wi-Fi router to the other side of the wall, you know, in the neighbor's flat, that kind of thing. Time and time again, I've heard these stories. So we need to understand just how pervasive, how detrimental to health these exposures can be.
And what I see too, you highlighted a lot of research, which is fantastic because the research has started to really pile up. But I think something we should at least mention here quickly is that research takes a while. So if we're looking at a research paper that was published today, when did that research paper likely originate? Maybe 3 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even longer. And so if we think about 5 years ago, what technology were they using back then to do the study? And how much farther or further has the technology gone to exacerbate maybe what was known in that study years ago, right? So
Exactly.
there's a delay here.
And the thing is, all the studies are only looking at one EMF exposure.
Right.
Like the 2010.
It's not the real world.
It's not the real world. It's one cell phone, which is probably a 2G cell phone. The NTP study, the most recent big study, just looking at how radio frequency radiation impacted rats. Just radio frequency radiation, not the real world at all. We're surrounded by these exposures, and already they're getting really clear evidence of cancer.
Right.
So you can see where I'm coming from. You see why this is important.
Yeah, and I love the way you present, because it's not coming from a fear porn type of angle, right? It's the idea here is not to create more fear, such that it paralyzes us and we don't know what to do. But there is a healthy amount of fear, I would say, or awareness that we can place around this stuff. Because look, this is a really good, important lesson that a shaman really drilled into me, which is that fear is useful. Fear is not necessarily a bad thing. Fear can be a very, very good thing, as long as you're not stuck in it, right? And you're just constantly swimming in it. But fear can be a motivating factor to do so many beautiful things. And so if we can at least create that alarm bell in us saying, look, this is important to pay attention to. This is not something that we can brush under the rug anymore. We need to have a healthy fear of this so that we can take action and not live in a constant state of fear.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I totally agree on that. If fear is healthy, it's really difficult one, that this notion that fear can be healthy. But I think what is really, really healthy is awareness, is understanding, and being fearful. That the problem is being actually in a state of fear actually leads to kind of analysis paralysis, not doing anything. But yeah, for me, the key thing is just this awareness, just beginning to understand. And the problem is that many people are not understanding until it's too late, until it's like it's already hit them, until they've already got the doctor's diagnosis of whatever they've got, and then they're trying to figure the stuff out like backwards way on.
Absolutely. And I guess I just to sort of, because I totally agree with you. But if a tiger comes around the corner, there's a healthy fear that's going to propel adrenaline and help me run away. So I guess I just want to clarify that, because that's really what I mean, is that if it helps us take, impact and action, then that's going to help us. That's
absolutely
really the way.
Yeah. That's the thing, is taking action, is dealing with this thing, is doing something about it. And that's the whole purpose of what I'm sharing. Hopefully folks at home, you're going to do something about this now.
and I think as technology continues to progress, if we have this awareness around the potential negative impacts, then, we can push back. When it comes to these 5G things that are starting to pop up all over the place, we at least have a framework to understand why this might be worth questioning and why it might be worth pushing back on, because we're moving faster than the research is allowing us to understand. And again, to really make this point known, we can't possibly study the real world when it comes to these things. It's too complex. We're swimming in a sea of these EMFs, and it's impossible to understand the interactions.
It is, which brings us back to this, just, electric sense, common sense, just common sense. Just, listen to your heart on this. You've heard my presentation. You've seen what I've shared here today. And so even if you're not fully on board, at least delve into this further. If you're not ready to take action, be open to exploring this further, again, for not just you, but for your family, for your family, for your loved ones, for the people you care about. That's what's important.
So just to recap some of the solutions: turning things off, fundamental, easy, profound. Creating distance, right? So anything that might be on, creating distance is going to impact, it's going to have a marked decrease on the impact of our bodies. I would say 3, and my most favorite, get outside, away from the buildings, away from the cities, right? So just getting outside is an effective solution. Those are 3 big ones. What am I missing? Anything? I know there's lots of little ones. I'm just sort of on a grand scale.
Eliminating any form of wireless, thinking about that, look, just having this awareness of what wireless, these clever little words they use for wireless, Bluetooth, smart, all these little catchy terms that they're using. Don't be caught out from that, with that. Understand what it is. It's very, very bad news for your health, for your energy, for this bio energy, this field, this everything. Think about it like that. So maybe that's a bit too complicated. Maybe you're not there yet on this, but yeah, it's and reconnecting with nature. So it's all about, honestly, anything which is putting you in an environment where it is artificial lighting, indoors. It's good for a time, but you need to, you know, that's what I do constantly, is reconnect with nature, literally reconnecting with nature, going into nature, spending time with in nature, and not trying to think about anything particularly, you know, not trying to think about work, not trying to think about EMFs.
Absolutely. So, okay. So we got get outside, get into nature and away from these things, turn them off. We can wire things in our house, and we can create distance. Even a little bit of distance is helpful. So those are the big ones. If you want a real quick takeaway for more, you can go to electricsense.com and get all kinds of tips and tricks and go deeper on a lot of this stuff. I know you have a lot of resources there. So I would encourage people who are interested in how to directly take impact to go check out your stuff. Lloyd, thanks so much for presenting today. You have a ton of information, and thank you again for distilling it down to us to make sense of some of the most important research, I think, that's being done today.
Well, thank you, Jason, for the chance to share this information with your listeners and viewers. It's been a lot of fun. I enjoy talking about this and sharing it, and you know, please share this and get the word out on this. That's what I say to people. Tell your friends about this.
Absolutely. All right, Lloyd, thanks so much.
Thank you.